live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.
Benny Ricciardi is here to break down the day's betting board for you.
Let's go, Jerry. Go!
Taking a first look at the day's bets, it's time for the FTN Betting Show. Welcome to the FTN Betscast for Monday, June 6th here at FTN Bets, sponsored by our friends over at Sleeper. NBA Game 2 went off last night. Hopefully you guys caught the podcast yesterday. Game turned into a little bit of blowout, as expected. As we said, the Celtics did their job. They won one of the two games in Golden State, which is really all the road team needed to do, and that's what they did. Not that they rolled over or they didn't care yesterday, but Golden State came out. They had more to play for. They needed that win bigger. They went hard. They wound up blowing it open in the third quarter. And you know what? That's the way that it goes sometimes. We'll be back, I think, Wednesday is the next game here. So we'll talk a little bit of NBA action on Wednesday. But since we don't have any NBA action tonight, what I wanted to do is kind of talk a little bit about MVP odds for the upcoming 2022-23 NFL season. The MVP odds at most of the major online sports books are out right now. So I wanted to kind of take a walk through it and see if we can find some value here. Who's worth putting their money on, who's not worth putting their money on, and, where we can kind of try to make a little bit of a profit here. So the first thing I want to start with is the old adage that the MVP of the NFL is a quarterback award. And I got to be honest, the more I look at this, guys, the more I research this, the more I dive into it, it's absolutely true. I mean, going back to 2007, there has only been one non-quarterback that has won the MVP award, and that was in 2012 with Adrian Peterson. The last one to do it before him, I think LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006. So, you're looking at, 14 of the last 15 years, we basically had a quarterback win this award. So if you start looking, you really got to look at some of the quarterbacks. And I'm just going to throw some numbers out there for you, just of a couple guys in recent memory that you guys will remember who had monster seasons as non-quarterbacks and did not walk away with this award. So we can go back to just last year, right off the top to start it right there. Cooper Kupp with the wide receiver triple crown last year, 145 catches, that led the league. 1,947 yards, also led the league. 16 touchdowns, led the league in that category too. So you're talking about a guy at a wide receiver position who had the most catches in the league with 145. Almost 2,000 yards receiving and scored 16 touchdowns in 17 games. So basically a touchdown a game. And yes, he did win the offensive MVP award, or the offensive player of the year award, but he did not win the MVP. Go back even a little further than that. We have, Derrick Henry in 2020 ran for over 2,000 yards, had 17 touchdowns, a touchdown per game. Again, offensive player of the year, not the MVP that year as well. You could even look at like a Christian McCaffrey in 2019, 278 carries, 1,387 yards, 15 touchdowns. Added to that, 116 catches for over 1,000 yards, 1,005 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Again, offensive player of the year award, not an MVP. 23, almost 2,400 total yards for him there. 19 touchdowns on the season. Did not walk away with an MVP award. What this should be telling you here, guys, is it doesn't really even matter at this point how good of a season some of these guys have. Now, again, Adrian Peterson ran for 2,000 yards when he won his. Did not have as many touchdowns as some of these other guys did. And that was when the last guy that actually did it and win the MVP award. So what do you need to be a non-quarterback to win the MVP award? I mean, I'm not even really sure. I mean, last year, Cooper Kupp, 145, 1947, and 16 came up short. So do we need 150 receptions? Do we need 2,000 yards? Do we need more than a touchdown per game? I mean, Cooper Kupp's season last year was magical. It was unbelievable. It seemed like everything went right and the guy was completely unstoppable. Even when teams were, shifting coverage to him and doubling him and doing all this stuff, he still managed to get open and he still managed to produce. It was one of the greatest seasons in NFL history. And the guy didn't walk away with an MVP award. Again, Christian McCaffrey, 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving in the same season, 19 touchdowns, did not walk away with an MVP award. I'm not even sure what somebody would have to do. Would we need like a 2,500 yard rusher? I mean, again, Derrick Henry, basically the same exact numbers, better touchdown numbers than Adrian Peterson had in 2012. And he didn't win the award with over 2,000 yards rushing. Now, again, we do have 17 games. So, yeah, it's arguably a little bit easier to get 2,000 yards rushing now. But, I mean, where is the line there for a non quarterback to win it at this point? So, again, there's a lot of guys that are out there, but I wanted to just kind of prove to you guys that quarterback is the way to go. So, if we're looking for MVP odds this year, looking at anything but a quarterback doesn't really make sense here. So, again, we're not going to talk too much about some of these position players. There are lots of great ones playing lots of positions in the NFL. There are stud running backs. There are stud wide receivers. There are stud defensive players who barely even get into the conversation of MVP, occasionally, except for some novelty act from some writer somewhere who's just trying to prove a point. But what I'm trying to say to you guys is if you're putting actual money down on an MVP candidate and it's not a quarterback, you're almost lighting the money on fire at this point. So keep that in mind as we walk through some of these numbers here. So the other thing I want to do then, if we understand that a quarterback is the guy who's most likely to win the MVP award, let's look at what we really need from some of these quarterbacks in order to do it. So the last two MVP awards have gone to Aaron Rodgers. 68.9% completion percentage last year, 4,115 yards passing, 37 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. What I want you guys to concentrate on as we talk about some of these next couple quarterbacks who have won the MVP award is the number of interceptions that they've thrown. Because there are a lot of guys that have thrown for, 4,000, 4,500, 5,000 yards and not won MVPs, but they all have like 10, 12, 15 interceptions in the seasons that they did it. There's a lot of guys that have thrown for 30 touchdowns and not won MVPs. There's even some guys that have thrown for 40 touchdowns and not won MVPs. But again, it's usually because there's a lot of negatives to go along with that. The voters really love the fact that Aaron Rodgers doesn't turn the ball over. And you can see that with the 2 MVPs he won in back-to-back seasons here. I actually think last year, his season 2020 was actually better than his MVP season in 2021. He did win the MVP in 2020 as well, but 4,300 yards in that season, 48 touchdowns. Again, only 5 interceptions. The single-digit interception thing is something that we really got to kind of concentrate on because very few guys are going to have a chance to win an MVP without it. I think we saw Patrick Mahomes in 2018 threw for over 5,000 yards, threw for 12 interceptions, but he also had 50 touchdowns. And that 50 touchdowns was really the thing that kind of pushed him over the edge there, right there for his MVP. The last 2 years with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, last year, 4,800 yards, 37 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. That's the thing that really killed him. 2020, he did have a chance to the MVP, although he lost it to Aaron Rodgers, who had a slightly better season, but he threw for 4,700 yards, 38 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Aaron Rodgers had 48 touchdowns that year and only 5 interceptions, a little bit less than the yardage, but still 4,300-ish. So that's really kind of what got him over there. The other guy who won in between the Mahomes and the Aaron Rodgers ones was Lamar Jackson. Jackson's passing stats were not as gaudy as some of the other numbers we've seen here. But again, he didn't have a bad season passing in 2019 when he won the MVP. He threw for over 3,000 yards, had 36 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. So again, the low interception number is something that is very important. But remember, when Lamar won it with those numbers, he also rushed for 1,200 yards on 176 carries and 7 touchdowns, 6.9 yards per carry. And that's the thing is he was a 1,000-yard rushing quarterback on top of being a solid quarterback who was very efficient and didn't turn the ball over a lot, which again is one of the things that the MVP voters seem to put up there as something that they're looking at. 2017, the MVP was TB12, Tom Brady, 4,577 yards passing for him, 32 touchdowns, and again, only 8 interceptions. The year before, Matt Ryan, 4,944 yards passing, 38 touchdowns, and again, only 7 interceptions, single-digit number. The year before that, Cam Newton did throw. Actually, I'm not sure how many interceptions Cam had. We'll have to look that up again. But, Cam was another guy who was kind of like the Lamar Jackson light season. Threw for just shy of 4,000 yards. I think he was at 38, 37, 35 touchdowns in that 10 interceptions. So he did have 10 interceptions there. 35 touchdowns is what he threw. But he also rushed for 633 yards and had 10 touchdowns with his legs. 2014 was another, I think that was the second of Aaron Rodgers' 4 MVP awards. Peyton Manning won the award the year before that. Again, you start going down the list and you just see quarterback after quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, all the way until we get down to that 2012 one, which Adrian Peterson won. But again, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 MVPs since Adrian Peterson won in 2012 have all gone to some of the quarterbacks here. So let's take a look at some of the quarterbacks. The guy with the lowest odds on the board is going to be Josh Allen. Josh Allen is plus 700 on DraftKings, plus 700 on FanDuel. Caesars, MGM, all have him at that same number. He is the lowest price guy on the board, the number one candidate to win MVP this year. So let's look at the numbers that Josh Allen's put up. So in 2020, he had 4,544 yards passing, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, a little bit high on that interception number there, rushed for another 421 yards and another 8 touchdowns right there, and did not win an MVP. So those are kind of like his baseline numbers. I mean, even last year, 4,400 yards passing, 36 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, which again is the thing that kind of holds him back. More yards with his legs on the ground, 763 with 6 touchdowns for him in 2021. Yes, I do think he's a candidate here, but what is he going to have to do? He's really going to have to drop that number of interceptions. In order for Josh Allen to win this award, he's probably going to have to rush for another 750 to 800 yards right there. That would put him ahead of Cam Newton, slightly behind Lamar Jackson on their MVP seasons. Those are the two guys that we're kind of, comparing him with a little. The thing that gives Josh Allen a little bit of a leg up, though, is, Josh Allen is going to throw for more yards than Lamar Jackson did in 2019 or Cam Newton did in 2015. And that's really why I think he has a chance here. I mean, we're probably going to it would probably take about 4,500 yards for him. I'd say at least 35 to 40 touchdowns, probably more on the high end of 40. He's got to cut that interception number down basically in half. He threw 15 last year. That number, as we've seen from the guys who've won this award in the last 8 or 9 years, that number's got to get down below 10. So he's going to have to really improve on that interceptions there. And then, like I said, he would basically have to match what he did with his legs this year. Maybe add even a couple more touchdowns there to make it a little bit more gaudy, a little bit more in mind of what Lamar Jackson did in his season when he went nuts there. So can we get a 4,500 yard, 40 touchdown, 7 or 8 interception, 750 yard rushing, 6 or 7 touchdown year out of Josh Allen? Yeah, I think we can. Do I think that, that happens 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 8 times? I don't know about that. So I think that plus 700, I don't think it's a bad number here for Josh Allen. Because again, look at the names of the guys who've won this award recently. Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. Even Matt Ryan when he won it in 16 and Cam Newton when he won it in 15. Those were guys that were going pretty highly in fantasy, guys that people were projecting to have really, really good seasons there. You're not going to get a guy again, I'm a Jets fan, so Zach Wilson is not going to all of a sudden jump up and be an MVP candidate at the end of the season. It's probably going to be those guys at the top, those quarterbacks, those top, maybe 5 or 6 guys that everybody's looking at who is going to be the chance. So if you're going to drop some money on an MVP, Josh Allen, I think, is one of those guys that you could look at there. I do think he has a good chance. He is somebody that I think we should be talking about for the award. The next shortest price out there in the market is going to be Patrick Mahomes. The best price we can get on Patrick Mahomes here is plus 900 on DraftKings. He's 800 on FanDuel and Caesars plus 700, the same as Josh Allen over at BetMGM and PointsBet he's 700 as well. So let's see. When we look at Patrick Mahomes, I mean, each of the last 2 years, 4,700, 4,800 yards. Nothing wrong with that. 37, 38 touchdowns. Nothing wrong with that. In 2020, he only had 6 interceptions, which is a really good number. 2021, though, 13 interceptions, and that was one of the things that did him in. The other thing that kind of does Patrick Mahomes into me here is, when you're looking at these teams right now, right, you're going to have guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen who are going to also run for 500, 600, 700 yards, maybe even up to 1,000 yards this year, as we've seen these guys do in the past. There's a couple other guys like maybe Kyler Murray or something you could throw in that list, maybe a Jalen Hurts or something. These guys are getting 500, 600, 700 yards on the ground or projecting for 400, 500, 600, 700 yards on the ground. I don't think Patrick Mahomes has ever had more than 300 yards on the ground. Now, again, Patrick Mahomes is not slow. He's not unathletic. It's not that he couldn't rush for more yards if he wanted to. It's just not the way that offense was built. Plus, you have to think about this as well is, Tyreek Hill is gone this year. McCall Hardman is still there, but Byron Pringle is gone this year. You're adding in Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, the rookie. I don't know if the weapons are as good here for Patrick Mahomes as they have been in the past in order for him to put up those numbers. And remember, weapons matter, right? Like, look what happened the 1 year Tom Brady had some actual legit wide receiver weapons up in New England. Threw for 50 touchdowns when he had Randy Moss there for that year. You know what I mean? Like, so, having good weapons, having good wide receivers on the outside definitely helps. Now, again, he still has some good running backs. The wide receivers, they'll still be, they got some speed. Those guys will make some plays. They'll get open. Mahomes will throw them into, some good situations. You still have Travis Kelce, who's an absolute stud and will put up some numbers as well. But it's tough for me to really get behind Patrick Mahomes as the second shortest price to win MVP here, when this is a guy who's not going to have the same kind of rushing numbers as some of the other guys he's going up against. When he won his MVP award, that was the year I think he threw for 50 touchdowns. That's really what we're going to need out of him. We're going to need a 50 touchdown, 5,000-yard season out of Patrick Mahomes to put him in contention with some of these other guys who are still throwing for, 3,500 to 4,500 yards, getting 35 to 40 touchdowns, and also rushing for 5 to 7 to 1,000 yards, 500 to 700 to 1,000 yards, and getting a couple touchdowns on the ground over there. So Patrick Mahomes, even at plus 900 on DraftKings, not somebody that I'm really looking at as someone I want to put MVP money on here. Next shortest price after him is going to be Aaron Rodgers. I mean, listen, the guy has won back-to-back MVP awards. I don't really know what else you could say that would be bad. I mean, listen, he's actually not the guy who throws for the most yards every year. So, I mean, maybe we would need to see like a 5,000-yard season out of him in order to get there. The 48 touchdowns he had in 2020 when he won was just a monster number. Last year he had under 40. I think it was 37 is what he finished with. I think he missed one game during the season too. So maybe he could have gotten to 40. I think he's going to have to get to 40 or more at a minimum this year. Definitely needs to throw for at least 4,000 yards, if not more than that as well, in order to be up there in contention. So do I think Aaron Rodgers can do it? Like, absolutely. I mean, the guy is coming off literally back-to-back MVP seasons. He is 10 to 1 or plus 1,000 on DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, or Caesars. I think I would rather put money on Aaron Rodgers than I would on, Patrick Mahomes here. But here's the thing. Do you think that they really give in order for Aaron Rodgers to win 3 MVP awards, I think he's really going to have to run away with it this year. And that's going to mean 4,500 to 5,000 yards passing. That's going to mean he's going to need to throw, probably 40 to 45 touchdowns. And he's going to have to do it without Devontae Adams this year. You look at the wide receivers that he has to work with. I just don't see how Aaron Rodgers ends up with a third one here. So at 10 to 1, like I said, I like him a little more than I like Patrick Mahomes. But these are 2 guys that I would be avoiding here overall. The next 2 guys that we talk about, though, I think are guys who have good value to win the MVP award. The first one is going to be Tom Brady, a guy who already has, I think, 3 MVP awards. It might be 4. I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure it's at least 3. Last year, he did throw for over 5,000 yards, 5,316 yards, 43 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. The interception number, I think, is what kept people off of him here. Because last year, the 5,316 yards was the most yards that Tom Brady has ever thrown for in his career. The 43 touchdowns was the second most touchdowns since the year that he threw for 50 touchdowns, which was the huge year that he had up in New England there. He is plus 1,000 on DraftKings, plus 900 on Caesars, 850 on PointsBet, and as low as 800 over on FanDuel and BetMGM. That DraftKings number to me is the one that I really want to get some money down on. Tom Brady plus 1,000 to win MVP over on DraftKings, I think is a really good value. Like I said, we're getting at least 200 to 150 basis points from some of the other books on Tom Brady to be able to pull this off this year. So I really like that Tom Brady to win MVP award this year at 10 to 1. Another guy who I have some interest in that's over 10 to 1 is going to be Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So let me just give you the raw numbers for Justin Herbert last year. Again, in 2020, that was his rookie season. He didn't play the whole season. I think he only played in 14 games maybe. And he threw for 4,336 yards, had 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 66.6% completion percentage. That was a really, really good rookie year for Justin Herbert. Very, very good rookie year, I should say. And he actually improved on those numbers last year. Last year, he threw for 5,000 yards. Him and Brady, I think, were the 2 guys that cracked that mark. 38 touchdowns he had last year, which is pretty good. But he had the same con that we've been talking about here with a lot of these guys, 15 interceptions. That's the number that he's really going to have to kind of improve on this year. If you get another 5,000 yard season out of Justin Herbert, if he can cut those interceptions down below 10 and throw for 40 touchdowns, again, he had 38 last year. So it's not like, 40 is a crazy, crazy number for him to reach here. I think he has a chance. But here's the other thing I want to talk about. The other con with Justin Herbert that we really have to talk about is going to be record, right? Like he was 9-8 last year and wasn't even in the discussion for MVP, despite throwing for 5,000 yards and almost 40 touchdowns. You look at guys like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, the guys who people were talking about as MVPs last year, all these guys in the seasons where they had their MVPs, Cam Newton won the MVP. He was 15-1. Lamar Jackson when the Ravens had that great year. Patrick Mahomes when the Chiefs had that great year. Aaron Rodgers the last 2 seasons has been 13-3 with the Green Bay Packers. This is the other thing that I think is holding back a guy like Justin Herbert. In order for Herbert to win this award, you're probably going to need to see the Chargers go, 13-4 in their 17 games this year, maybe 12-5 at worst. They're going to probably have to make the playoffs, most likely win their division in order for him to be in there, even if he does throw for the 5,000 yards here. So again, you're getting him at 12-1. I don't think it's a horrible price over on Caesars where you can get that 12-1. He's plus 1,000 on DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, MGM. So that Caesars number is the one that's a little off. It's about 200 basis points above where you're going to be able to get this on any other site. So I like Justin Herbert plus 1,200 over on Caesars to win the MVP this year. I think that's worth a little bit of a sprinkle there. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, like I said, I think the MVP candidate comes from one of those 5 quarterbacks that we just mentioned here. You look at the years past, it always seems to be the guys who make the most sense, the quarterbacks that make the most sense, the ones who are playing on the teams that should be the ones that are playing for Super Bowls, the ones that are getting the most publicity. Those are the guys that you really want to look at if you're looking to get your money down on an MVP bet for the NFL 2022-23 season. So let's talk about some of the dark horse guys that could win it, right? So again, we're going to start with the quarterbacks. Who are some of the dark horse quarterbacks that can win it? Well, we talked about some of the numbers here, right? If you're a guy who's more of a pocket passer, you're going to need 40 touchdowns. You're probably going to need to throw to close to 5,000 yards. The only other guy on this list that we haven't mentioned who I think could do that, I don't think Joe Burrow can do that. I think his numbers are going to regress a little bit this year. They're going to have a much tougher schedule. Teams are going to really concentrate on that passing game. I just, again, maybe they are as good as they were last year, but I think that he had, I don't want to call it a fluky season because that's not the right word for it. But I think a lot of things went very right for the Cincinnati Bengals offense last year, especially when you talk about the passing game. Joe Burrow threw a ton of touchdowns last year, but the more you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem like it's a sustainable number. That would be a guy that I'd be a little bit worried about regression this year. But one guy who I think might be able to take a step forward is going to be Dak Prescott. And the reason why is I don't think their running game is as good as it has been in the past, which means they're going to have to rely on the passing game a little more. In 2021, Dak threw for just shy of 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, did have 10 interceptions, only played 16 games. So if he plays the full 17 games, you could be looking at 4,800 yards, 40 touchdowns for him. And hopefully he can throw a few less interceptions to get that number down. Dak is 18-1 over on Caesars, plus 1,800, which I think is a pretty good number for him to take there. DraftKings has it at 16-1. PointsBet is 15-1. MGM is 14-1. And then plus 1,200 on FanDuel is the lowest price there on Dak Prescott. So again, you're getting at least 200 to 600 basis points better on Caesars than you're getting on some of the other sites. I know that the wide receiver core is technically less than it was last year. But again, you still have CeeDee Lamb there. You still have Michael Gallup there. There's a lot of solid players that are on this team that can go out there and make some noise. So I do still think Dak Prescott has a chance. Again, an outside chance, but something that might be worth throwing a couple bucks on, or maybe if you got a random free bet line around that you want to get a big payout on and you don't know what to throw it on and you don't mind waiting a while, Dak Prescott could be the guy that you want to get that money down on. The other quarterback that I think has a little bit of a dark horse chance is going to be Kyler Murray. In 2020, he threw for just shy of 4,000 yards, not a huge touchdown thing, only 26 touchdowns there, did throw 12 interceptions, which is not good, but he does have that leg thing going on that we talked about with a guy like Lamar Jackson. He ran for 819 yards and 11 touchdowns on 133 attempts, 6.2 yards per carry, a little bit below the 6.9, that Lamar Jackson had. But again, a guy that has a chance to rush for 1,000 yards this year. If he throws for 4,030 something touchdowns, if he rushes for 1,000 yards and gets double digit touchdowns there, you put that season up against Lamar Jackson's season, 3,100 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. If Kyler can cut the interceptions down and put up that same kind of number, you got to think that he's at least a dark horse candidate to be in the conversation if he puts up that Lamar Jackson 2019 season. And I do think that that's something that he could do. Now, again, plays against a couple tough defenses, plays in a tough division. They have a pretty tough schedule this year. With that being said, you're getting paid pretty handsomely if you put your faith in Kyler. 22-1 plus 2,200 on FanDuel. Best price you can get on Kyler Murray for MVP. I think that's something that's worth a couple bucks going down there over at FanDuel. He's plus 2,000 on MGM, Caesars, DraftKings, all the other major books here. So you're getting a little bit more, 200 basis points basically to take him on FanDuel. And I do think he's somebody there. Now, that pretty much sums it up for the dark horse QB candidates. Guys like Burrow, guys like Stafford, guys like Jalen Hurts. I assume that all those guys will take some money, but I just don't see any of those guys being the MVP of the league with some of these other guys that are just likely to put up bigger numbers, more passing yards, more rushing yards from the quarterback position, more, touchdowns, more touchdown passes, and less interceptions. That's the way that I think you win the MVP award. And that's the way the numbers have borne out that you've won the MVP award over the years. So let's see. You want some big money dark horses? All right. So big money dark horses. Again, we're going to have to talk about non-quarterbacks as our big money dark horses. And we're getting paid pretty handsomely to take somebody who's not a quarterback. Now, I know I just went on a 10-minute rant at the beginning of this thing, how quarterbacks always win it. But they always win it until they don't, right? And that's the whole point is, all these quarterbacks are 7-1, 10-1, 8-1, 12-1, 15-1. Kyler Murray might be the 8th or 9th quarterback in the MVP, payout list, and he's still only 22-1. You can get some of the best players in football that do not play the quarterback position at 50-1 or higher. So here's an example for you, like Cooper Kupp. We talked about that unbelievable Cooper Kupp year. I don't think Cooper Kupp can go back and do the same thing he did last year, this year. I don't think Cooper Kupp's going to improve on that season. Again, not that I'm saying Cooper Kupp's not going to be good, not that I'm knocking Cooper Kupp at all. He could very well win another wide receiver triple crown. But again, 150 catches, 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. Like, do we really think these are numbers that he can get? I mean, again, maybe. And if he does, we better be getting paid pretty well for it. And we actually would be getting paid pretty well for it if we decide to bet on it. PointsBet has the best number on Cooper Kupp, 80-1 plus 8,000 on PointsBet for Cooper Kupp to be the MVP this year. Again, quarterbacks normally win this award. Very few position players do. If he didn't win it last year, I mean, what does he have to do? What does the guy have to do to win the MVP award after the season he put up last season? But you never know. Maybe he does come back and have 150 catches, 2,000 yards, and 20 touchdowns. And if he does, and they still don't give him the MVP award, I think it's safe to say that we should never, ever, ever bet on position players to win this award again. And I got to be honest, after him not winning it last year, like I said, that's pretty much where I am here. But if you're going to give me 80-1 odds on it, again, might be worth throwing a $10 free bet that you have to win $800 if Cooper Kupp does manage to turn things around. So the last non-quarterback to win the award, as we said, was Adrian Peterson, who had a monster 2,000-yard season with double-digit touchdowns. LaDainian Tomlinson, I think, had 20-something touchdowns in 2006. He was the last running back to win it the year before. So those are the things that I'm looking at here is you're going to need to come up with 2,000-plus yards. You're going to probably need to come up with close to 20 touchdowns in order for a running back to win. And I think there's 3 guys that have a chance to do it. So the first one is going to be our 2020 Offensive Player of the Year, and that's going to be Derrick Henry. Again, Derrick Henry had a 2,000-yard season with 17 touchdowns already and did not win this award. But we are being paid handsomely. He's 40-1 on MGM. He's 50-1 plus 5,000 on DraftKings, PointsBet, FanDuel, and Caesars here. I think it's going to take a 2,000-yard, 20-touchdown season for Derrick Henry to win it. I also think that the Titans are going to have to go like 12-5 or better. Same thing I said with Justin Herbert there, because you got to have your team in contention, probably winning your division at the least and having a chance to win the conference title overall and the number 1 seed and all that good stuff. But again, at 50-1, I think it's at least worth a little bit of a shot here. Would I put a lot of money on it? No. Is it something that I'm very, very interested in? No, not at all. But with that said, I do think he's somebody that's at least viable. Another guy that I think is viable is the guy who kind of took the mantle from him last year when he got injured, and that was Jonathan Taylor, who ended last season 1,811 yards and 18 touchdowns on 332 attempts, had another 360 receiving yards. So what are you looking at there? Like 2,200 total yards, another 2 touchdowns there. So he did have the 20 touchdowns last year. Again, offensive player of the year, although he fell short of winning the MVP, which ultimately went to Aaron Rodgers. I think these guys, these running backs are going to need to lead their team to, honestly, it might even need to be more than 12 wins, maybe 13 or 14 for a running back, maybe even 14 or 15 for one of these running backs to be there, along with the 2,000 yards and the 20 touchdowns and all that stuff. But again, if anybody's going to do it, guys like Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, these are the guys that we're looking at here. Taylor is also 50-1 on most sites, but you can get him 60-1 plus 6,000 over on PointsBet. That would be the place that I would be looking to get a couple bucks down on him over there. PointsBet 60-1 plus 6,000. Jonathan Taylor, I think, is in play. And then for me, the long shot, my favorite long shot to win the MVP this year, if I'm looking for a dark horse candidate, is going to be Christian McCaffrey. I've already seen people taking Christian McCaffrey 1-1 overall again in fantasy this year. And that's honestly not a crazy thing to think about here. I want to talk about that 2019 season when he won Offensive Player of the Year. 278 rushing attempts, 116 catches. There are wide receivers who don't end up with 116 catches. There are most wide receivers that don't end up with 116 catches. There is less than a handful of guys who, again, is their job as a wide receiver to catch passes that aren't even going to get close to that 116 number. So Christian McCaffrey theoretically has a chance to lead the league or be top 5 in the league in receptions if he can get back to that 2019 form. Again, this is another guy, though, like, what does he need to do to win the MVP? I mean, that 2019 season, he had 2,392 yards from scrimmage. He had 1,000 yards plus receiving. He had 1,000 yards plus rushing. He scored 19 total touchdowns in that season. So, I mean, what do we need him to do? Maybe 1,500 yards this year rushing, 1,000 yards receiving, 120 catches. I mean, these are the kind of things that, these are like video game numbers when you're playing on easy, not on all Madden, when you're playing on like, the college level or whatever the lowest level that you could put it on is. These are the kind of numbers, though, that didn't even win him the award last time. And that's why I said I like the fact that we're getting plus 150 odds, plus 15,000 on FanDuel and BetMGM for Christian McCaffrey to win the MVP award. But again, I don't even know how good a season he's going to have in order to take it from a quarterback. You're probably looking at 2,500 all-purpose yards. He would need 20 plus touchdowns, 100 plus catches. That's really the only way I could see him doing this. Can he do it? Absolutely. Do I think he's one of the best players in football? Definitely one of the most versatile, definitely one of the more talented ones out there. So again, at plus 150, I think we're getting a little bit too good of an odd on Christian McCaffrey to have a bounce back season and win the MVP. So there you go. That's going to wrap it up for our NFL MVP discussion here on the FTN Bestcast for Monday, June 6th. Remember, you can get over to Sleeper now, the fastest growing fantasy platform today with millions of players, and you can even play in their new over-under game. It's very easy to play. When the NBA game rolls around on Wednesday, you guys should all be signed up for this already and ready to go. In any sport, what's going to happen is they're going to throw out a bunch of listed totals, and you're going to pick whether you think those players are going to go over that total or under that total. So, for example, when we have the NBA Finals Game 3 on Wednesday, could be things like the number of points Steph Curry is going to score, the number of rebounds Jason Tatum's going to get, the number of assists for a guy like Marcus Smart. And then you're going to pick an amount of money that you want to put into the contest. And then if you pick correctly, you can win anywhere from 2 times your money all the way up to 20 times your money if you go 5 for 5 and get them all correct. But the main reason why I'm excited about this over-under game, it's the only app where you can join with all your friends and play together. You could see what I'm putting in. I could see what you're putting in. We could all see what the guy who's won a bunch of days in a row is putting in, and you could follow along. And it's insanely fun when everybody in your group is rooting for the same things and trying to get all that money. So on your mobile phone, go down to the description here. You're going to see sleeper.com/FTN bets in the description. Click on that link. It gets you into our group, and it will get Sleeper to give you up to $100 match on your first deposit here. So make sure you get over to sleeper.com/FTN bets. Get that $100 match. Play with your friends and make a little bit of money in the process. There are terms and conditions that apply, so make sure you see Sleeper's terms of use for those details. And with that, this is Benny Ricciardi signing off for FTN Bets. Good luck today, everybody.
Live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.